Okay, so welcome to a two-part video. This was supposed to be one video, but it ended up being enormous, so I'm splitting it in half, three parts, and we'll be dealing with the first two in this video, and then another one will drop pretty soon after. So, title is Durkheim, Solidarity and Punishment. So we're continuing on talking about Emile Durkheim, and discussing some things that we've already touched on, what social solidarity is, as well as his arguments about punishment and where punishment comes from. Except this time we're going to get into different types of punishment and how solidarity itself connects to punishment. Before though we get to that, I just want to remind you of a couple terms. Big one is collective consciousness. So there's did a whole bunch in this already in a couple previous videos, but just as a reminder, the collective consciousness consists of ways of acting, thinking, and feeling external to the individual and endowed by the power of coercion, by reason of which they control him. So that's a direct quote from Durkheim. The collective consciousness gives people ways of seeing in the world, acting in the world, dictates how we feel. And also, and this is incredibly important, especially for what we're going to be talking about here, the collective consciousness binds people together. It's what gives societies their cohesion. It's what gives societies their structure and organization. And it's really, for Durkheim, what makes any given society a society, or any given group a group. As a reminder, for Durkheim, deviance is every act which, to any degree whatsoever, evokes against its author the characteristic reaction which we term punishment. So deviance, as it will and has throughout our discussions, always be defined by not the act itself, by the reaction. So a deviant act is any act that leads to some kind of punishment, some kind of negative social reaction. Deviance serves as a threat to social solidarity. So if we are bound together, if we have group cohesion, deviance serves as a threat to that social solidarity, that sense of connection that people have to one another. And that's, from a societal perspective, that's a very dangerous thing. If society is going to exist, then deviance has to be responded to. Okay. I'm not using the word deviance here to mean good or bad or in any sort of judgmental way. I'm talking about from the level, or from the societal level, in terms of a collective response. Deviance becomes something that the group tries to clamp down on, tries to get rid of. And punishment serves as a collective response to the outrage to morality. So punishment is not some kind of rational response designed to deter crime. It's not to rehabilitate. It's this collective group response that has the goal of making offenders suffer, to punish the violation of the social rules. I'm going to tweak this a little bit as we get later on in actually will be the part two of this. But for right now, we're going to use that definition, or not definition, but we're going to use that description. So the major portion of the material for the rest of this video and the next is going to be the forms of solidarity. So Durkheim talks about two different kinds of solidarity. So again, solidarity is that sense of connection, that sense of cohesion within groups. And Durkheim discusses two different types of solidarity. And each of these, every society is going to be defined by one of these two, either mechanical solidarity or organic. I'm going to kind of dial that back a little bit. It's not as if these two types of solidarity are like polar opposites. I'm going to present them as if they're entirely distinct, as if there's no overlap between them. So, you either have a purely mechanical society or purely organic. Doesn't necessarily have to be like that, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to present it that way, right? And we're going to start by talking about mechanical, but for each type, or for all types, I want to address the following questions. First, where do we see that kind of solidarity? What is it? How do people that exist within those societies relate to the world? How do they relate to each other? What forms the collective consciousness that binds people together? And then how do people punish? So there's a lot here. Doesn't have to make sense. These questions don't really have to make sense at this point. Hopefully they will by the end. And yeah, I hope they do. We'll see. Depends on how good of a job I do. All right. So mechanical solidarity. So first, we had this question of where do we see mechanical solidarity? I'll define what it is in a minute. But before I do, I just want to set some kind of context. So Durkheim makes the argument that we're going to see mechanical solidarity in pre-modern societies, in pre-capitalist societies. I actually left out a word here. I should have also included non-capitalist. So it's not as if there are no societies now that aren't built on mechanical solidarity. It's just that we tend to think about these types of societies as being from the past. Okay, so before capitalism. So think hunter-gatherer tribes. Think medieval feudalism. Think ancient Rome, or anything before 1750s to 1850s, and after the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so the overwhelming majority of human history and existence has taken place within the context of societies built on mechanical solidarity. So everything from medieval peasants in Europe to the Yakuza tribal groups, which actually I assigned a reading about a bit ago, to any sort of tribal group of nomadic hunter-gatherers, and even modern day groups. So for instance, the Amish would fit into this category of living in a society defined by mechanical solidarity. So what is it? What does it mean to say that a group's sense of cohesion, a group's solidarity is mechanical? Well, Durkheim makes the case that this kind of solidarity is built on similarities. What that means is that all the different members of the group are really, really similar to each other. It's a bit of a foreign concept, given that we live in a society now and we're used to a world in which we think of ourselves as individuals, as unique, as being defined by our differences. But throughout the overwhelming majority of human existence, I mean, God, humans have been around for 200,000 years, ballpark, or at least Homo sapiens, our kind of human, has been around for 150, 200,000 years, and everything except the past couple hundred years has been cultures, groups, societies built on mechanical solidarity. So these societies are built on the similarities among members of the group. What the hell does that mean? Well, we want to think. Again, we're used to thinking in terms of individuality, right? We're used to thinking about ourselves in terms of the differences between you, me, whoever else. Our political views, our religions, our experiences, what the work that we do, the worldview that we have, and so on. We're very used to that. Well, where does that individuality come from? Well, as a sociologist, and which again, criminology is a form of sociology, it would make the case that our individuality comes from socialization. So the groups that we're a part of, the families that we grew up in, the religions that we're exposed to, the particular jobs that we have, the communities that we live in, and so on, become this mix of influences on us that give us our individuality. So I might learn things in my family of origin, and then I go to school and I learn things from friends, and other classmates who have different families of origin, different beliefs, and so on, teachers throughout the years. I go out and I get a job later on, and I'm exposed to all kinds of different ideas and different perspectives. Same thing, I'm watching TV and playing video games and listening to the radio or podcasts, and I'm being exposed to all kinds of influences throughout that entire process. And because my socialization experience is different from yours, we are going to be different from one another. But what happens when everyone in a community or a society essentially has the same socialization experience? Well, we end up in a situation where essentially everyone in that society is the same. Okay, everybody's like little copies of the group. I'll give you some examples in a moment. Actually, you know what? Let's just jump right to the next slide here. So I'm going to illustrate with the Amish here. So first thing, if I say the word Amish, I'm guessing most of you, at least if you grew up in the United States, are going to have an image in your head of what the Amish are, right? We have a lot of misconceptions about the Amish, but some of the things that are not misconceptions are the idea that they live in these tightly bound communities where people feel deeply connected to each other and so on. And if you picture an Amish community in your mind, you probably have an image of a bunch of men who all have beards, fairly long beards, men wearing the kind of clothing that you can see in this image. So I'm pointing at it as if you can see either me point or what I am pointing at. I could be pointing at anything. Who knows? So I should probably stop pointing at stuff. But we can see that there are not too many differences in the way these men are dressed. Some slight variations. So, some slight variations in the color of blue that the shirts are. This guy has a jacket and a slightly different hat, but everybody else dressed in very similar ways. Okay. So they're outwardly similar. Same thing here, a bunch of kids, all dressed in very, very similar ways. A bit more differentiation here. I'm guessing, I suspect because they're kids, so we see some more little floral pattern, I guess. I'm not really sure, but there's a little bit of differentiation. But still, they're clearly all dressed in very similar ways. This is not to emphasize individuality, it's to emphasize the connection, right, between the members of the group. So if we think about our experiences as socializing us, well, imagine you live in an Amish community. Instead of growing up and having your family of origin, which might be very different from the people who live next door, who might be different than the people who live next door, who might be different than the people who live down the street, you have a family of origin that is very similar to the other families around you. You have the same religion. Your parents have the same occupation. Your parents and family structure are going to be organized the same way. So you're significantly less likely to see things like different ways of organizing families, like a single parent or two men as parents, or polyamorous couples, or not couples, but polyamorous groups as in terms of families. You're going to see the same kind of family across the board, and your friends and the other people you're exposed to are going to grow up in that same environment. So same type of family structure, same type of religion, same type of values. Education is going to be the same for essentially everybody. Jobs later on in life are going to be the same for everybody. There are not so many outside influences coming into the community. So, again, we have a stereotype view of the Amish, but if you're Amish, you're probably not anyway, sitting around watching TV or going to the movies all that much. So you are less exposed to these kind of outside influences that non-Amish folks are. And so what you end up with is a bunch of people who have been socialized in very similar ways, who are then going to be very, very similar to one another. Okay. Here's just a picture that I found that was really great. I thought a whole bunch of people standing together, looking at something, clearly something interesting. Everyone except her right here. Everyone else seems to be, pretty focused on what's ahead of them. No idea what's happening or what they're looking at, but it's easy to tell in this picture how, that there are these very clear, distinct patterns in the way people are dressed. Now, also, you can also, just a quick side note, it's also there's very clear distinctions here between how men dress and how women dress. Okay, so we'll talk a bit more about that later. But we see very similar types of people that emerge from their very similar, virtually identical socialization experiences. So instead of having a wide range of individuals, people become very similar to one another. So then there's this question of people within societies built on mechanical solidarity. How do they relate to the world? Well, if you grow up in a society built on mechanical solidarity, you as an individual and your community as a whole, or your tribal group, or whatever, is going to be fairly self-sufficient. Not necessarily completely self-sufficient, but fairly self-sufficient. Now, we might think of ourselves now as self-sufficient. So if I were to be face-to-face with you and I said, hey, do you think of yourself as independent, self-sufficient, that you can rely on yourself, that you can make it yourself and make it your own way in the world, that you can survive on your own? There's a good chance you will answer, yes, I can do that. But you probably can't, because when we think of self-sufficiency in our lives, we tend to think in terms of, well, I can go to work and I can get money and I can buy food and clothes and I can pay rent and blah, blah, blah. But that only works in a society where other people are willing to do things for you if you give them money. So you are self-sufficient in the sense that you can buy food, but you're not self-sufficient in the sense that we can put you on a plane, drop you in the middle of the woods, and have you survive, right? In any meaningful sense. Would you be able to get food and make clothing and build a structure to live in and survive like that your entire life? Me personally, I would last 3 to 6 hours maybe before I either cried myself to death or got eaten by a bear or just, I don't know, I probably eat something poisonous. I'm not sure. I wouldn't last long. Don't have a lot of skills that would help me survive. Most of us don't, right? I mean, like, I talk for a living. I can't talk food out of the ground. So I'm not very self-sufficient. But these other kinds of societies are. So when a group of Amish people want to build a house, they build the house collectively together. They don't call in plumbers and electricians, each of which who have been trained separately and who are not part of the community. They're not calling architects and designers and bringing in city planners to see what the local zoning rules are. The community decides we need a house or we need a barn or whatever it is that they're building here. I probably should have checked. I just thought house and I'm looking at it. It's enormous, so it's probably not a house, but they're building a thing and they're building it together. And these are people in the community, right? So when they need a new building, they build it together. When they need clothing, they make it themselves. The food that they get, they make it themselves. And when I say they make it themselves, I don't mean they go to the store and buy like a chicken breast and then cook it. I mean, they raise the chicken, they kill the chicken, they take the feathers out of the chicken and whatever other stuff you have to do to the chicken, but I don't know because I don't know how to do any of it. I just know how to buy chicken. I'm not even good at that. Usually it's like a microwave thing and I just have to put in the microwave and press a button. So I am not self-sufficient, but this community is. It's not relying on outsiders. We see groups that provide for themselves. Here's another example. We see families, communities who are providing for their own food needs by farming, which the Amish do, which other sorts of groups do as well. Here we see an image of some medieval peasants who are working collectively to cook. So within these kinds of societies, we see people who are tightly bound together, who are self-sufficient, and who have very similar worldview skills, and are, very similar to one another and provide for themselves. So within this context, how do people relate to each other? Well, individuals become essentially microcosms of the group. What that means, it's kind of a pretentious phrase, but what that essentially means is that individuals don't necessarily think of themselves as individuals, at least not to the same extent that if you grew up in the United States or modern Europe or Japan or whatever, are going to think of themselves as individuals. The group itself is going to have strong social norms. It's going to have strong views about what's right and wrong. And the individual is going to reflect those views and behaviors and actions. So rather than thinking of oneself as an individual, one becomes almost subsumed into the group, into the culture as a whole. You become like a little mini version of this collective consciousness, okay? And each person is that, okay? So there really isn't too much in the way of, well, I'm not going to say there's no individuality, because there would be some differences, but there's not as much space for individuality. And so each person becomes a much stronger reflection of the group or the group's collective consciousness. Then we come to what is a weird question that it's not that I struggle to answer it. It's that there's, actually, I'm going to take a sip of water 1 second. Probably going to leave that in, because editing these things is hard and takes a long time. So just to get rid of that one drink of water would probably take me like 45 minutes to an hour, because I'm not good at this. So you're going to watch me drink that water, and you're going to just have to deal with it. What the hell was I talking about? Something, society. Okay, yeah. So what forms the collective consciousness? So I've been talking this whole time and was talking about this in previous lectures about this collective consciousness. But, it's been fairly abstract. So again, we have this definition here, which I've put in now. How many videos now? And how many times have I read it? I have lost count. But I'll read it again. The collective consciousness consists of ways of acting, thinking, and feeling external to the individual and endowed by the power of coercion, by reason of which they control him. Again, direct quote. So, I've talked about this collective consciousness before, but what I really haven't done is get into what we can refer to as the content of the collective consciousness. So what the hell does that mean? Well, when we talk about the collective consciousness, what makes up these ways of acting, thinking, and feeling, right? What is their source? So when I say the content of the collective consciousness, which is what I really mean when I say here, what forms the collective consciousness? What's the basis of it? I'm saying, well, what's the source? What is this collective consciousness? What are these ways of acting, thinking, and feeling based on? In other words, what provides the rules that govern the ways people act, think, and feel? And in uh, the majority, or maybe this might be universal. I can't think of exceptions, and I'm not aware of many arguments making saying that this is an exception. But so I'm going to just present this as the source. But in societies built on mechanical solidarity, the collective consciousness is going to be built around religion. It's going to be religion that provides people with the, hey, here's how you're supposed to act. Here's how you're supposed to think. Here's how you're supposed to feel. Religions are external to the individual. We don't individually create our own religions. We are born into worlds where the religion exists. Religions tend to be pretty stable, especially among groups that where everyone is very similar to one another. And religion has this coercive power, right? So there's the abstract idea of if you don't do the right thing, you're going to hell. And then there's also the fact that laws or social norms or informal kinds of punishment are going to be built on a religious basis. Okay, so religion is deeply, deeply ingrained in the lives of those who live in societies built on mechanical solidarity, and it's so ingrained and it's so built into the lives in a way that it's really would be very difficult for us to wrap our head around. You might think of yourself as religious, you might not. But however religious you are, it would be extremely difficult for you to really, really get the degree to which religion permeates the lives of people who live in societies built on mechanical solidarity. Religion provides all kinds of structure, all kinds of order, all kinds of cohesion. So for instance, religion provides rituals to mark changes in life. So here's an example of a Hindi wedding. So when I say changes in life or rituals that mark changes in life, I'm talking about rites of passage, rituals that symbolically, rituals that allow a person to symbolically move from one phase of life to another. So a marriage or a wedding, be it within a Hindi ceremony or Hindu ceremony rather, or yeah, sorry, Hindi's a language, Hindu's a religion. I don't know why I screwed that up. I apologize. Could I edit that out? Sure. Am I gonna? Probably not. So, but whether or not it's a Hindu ceremony or a Catholic wedding or whatever, this is a ritual that marks the transition from being a single individual to being within a married couple. And there are massive obligations that come along with that shift. So, for instance, childbearing or the raising of children, developing a family or building a family are social expectations that come along with that transition. So religion provides these rituals that say, okay, you are moving from being this to being this, and here are your new responsibilities. We see like a bar mitzvah is a transition to adulthood in Judaism. There's lots of them. Funerals are another kind of transition as well. Funeral rituals are deeply, deeply cultural. So here we see a cremation ceremony in Bali. And we also have images from a Catholic funeral. Now that I look at that image, I'm realizing that I should have looked at this closer. It's not a very well attended Catholic funeral. There's just two guys there. So hopefully this is before the funeral. Otherwise, this is just like a really unpopular person. But still, a funeral ritual is going to be one of these rituals that marks a transition. So religion provides us with a guide to what we are and what we are becoming within our lives. Religion also provides us with just rules for how to live on a day-to-day basis. So if we think about the 10 Commandments within Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, these are some pretty clear statements about do this, don't do that. So thou shalt have no other gods before me. thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, and all the rest of them. These are rules. These are statements for how to act and how to not act, right? And they are, from the perspective of those within the religion, given by God, right? There's a supernatural authority that says, do this, do not do this. And it's not limited to just actions either. It's limited to thoughts. So, for instance, the last one right here, last commandment, thou shalt not covet. That's not describing how you act from moment to moment, what you do. That's describing your internal state of mind. Don't want a thing. Don't, don't be, do you see a thing over there that you like? No. You can't let yourself want it. So it's not just about ways of acting and behavior. Thou shalt not kill, for instance, is discussing a behavior. Don't kill anybody. Thou shalt not covet. It describes a feeling, a mental state, a way of looking at the world, right? So religion and religious rules provide guides, very strong guides, for how to act, think, and feel, which are, again, the different aspects of the collective consciousness. So within the context of mechanical solidarity, and this is actually true of other societies later on as well, but especially true here, religion provides us with, or tells us what gender roles should be, tells us what forms of authority we should listen to, tells us how to raise kids, how to have sex, who we can have sex with, what positions we can have sex with, what we can be thinking about when we have sex, how we can work, what sort of jobs are okay, what sort of jobs are not, what sort of jobs are to be valued, what sort of jobs will pollute you from a social standpoint. What is a family? What do families look like? How are we supposed to act towards family? What are we supposed to think about family? What's education? How should we be educated? What counts as an education? What's an illness? If someone's sick, do they need an exorcism? Are they possessed by demons? Is there an afterlife? What happens when you die? Et cetera, 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 et cetera. So religion dictates, it's deeply ingrained in one's life, especially if you grow up within the context of a tribal or agricultural or feudal kind of society that's built on this solidarity through similarities, right? It's religion is just going to be so infused into every aspect of your life. It's going to govern all of these different things and more. So religion tells followers how to see the world. Religion tells followers how to act in the world. And religion tells followers what is right and what is wrong. So religion provides the content, the foundation for the collective consciousness in societies built on mechanical solidarity. All right. Last of the 6 questions. I'm gonna do another drink of water. My mouth is dry. Little accidental advertisement for Whole Foods there. I don't really shop at Whole Foods because I'm too poor. So I'm more of like a market basket guy. So I don't want that to misrepresent me there. I don't want to look all fancy and have it be a lie. Whole Foods is so much money. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so how do people punish? Well, punishment is going to be different in societies built on mechanical solidarity versus organic solidarity. What we've talked about so far, the idea that punishment is designed to make the offender suffer, that's repressive justice. You can also see it written sometimes as repressive sanctions. I have a bad habit of using those two terms interchangeably and not mentioning it. Just like I'll say one and then I'll say the other. So just a heads up, if I say repressive sanctions at some point, I mean this. I will do my best to not talk like that. But sometimes I forget. So just be aware. But anyway, repressive justice is punishment designed to make the offender suffer for the outrage to morality. This is not designed to prevent reoffending. This is not designed to rehabilitate. This is a collective response of the group to a violation of the social order. And the punishment is there to harm the offender, to make the deviant suffer. That's what it is. It's about, we collectively want you to feel pain or isolation or humiliation or whatever it is. And that's the point. And the reason why is because deviance threatens the social order. So if our society is built on similarities, if what's keeping us together, if what defines us as a group is our similarities, then how can we say that we are a group if there are people who don't follow the rules? Like literally the group itself is built on us doing similar things and acting in similar ways. So those similarities are what create us as a group. And we need each other. You know, we are, when we need food, we work collectively to make that food through farming. When we need a building, we work collectively to do it, right? Like we depend on the societies that we're a part of. And so deviance creates a sense of threat that people feel. And that as a group, they feel this collective outrage because it endangers the group's existence in very serious ways. A little side thing, this isn't really the more important one. It's really the first one that's more important. But since we are talking about us or societies where the rules and ways of thinking, acting, feeling, whatever, come from religion, then deviance not only violates the rules of the group, it violates the rules of God or the gods or nature, the natural order, spirits, our ancestors, whoever we're talking about. So it's not like now where if you break a law, we think, oh, well, like you were speeding. We don't really worry too much about it, or we don't think about it in a way that's makes us very angry. But if speed limits were handed down by God and defined whether or not you were good or bad, or whether or not you were worthy or not, or whether or not you should be, stoned to death or not, we would take speeding more seriously, right? So not only are you violating the group's rules, you are violating, you're going against God's wishes or nature's wishes or the ancestors' wishes or the godly pantheon's wishes. And so the rules take on a much greater significance than they would outside of the context of religion. And so these violations generate an outburst of collective rage. So when people feel threatened, they react with anger or fear or whatever. Well, when there is deviance within a group, the group as a whole is going to react collectively with rage against the offender. And it is a collective rage. It's a group rage. It's even if you personally don't initially feel upset or threatened or whatever, it's very difficult to not be caught up in the group's reaction as a whole. And so when we think about repressive punishment, we're thinking about the kinds of punishments that are public, that are painful, that are humiliating. They're a spectacle that everybody in the community takes part in. So this is what's called a pillory. Right here. If you've ever gone to, like a colonial village or some kind of like medieval recreation or something, you might have seen a pillory like this, or the stocks. And you may have taken a novelty picture where you put your, your hands in little holes and your head in the little bigger hole, and then they bring the second part down, and so you can't move, right? And we sit in those pillories like a silly way, like, oh, ha, isn't this funny that I'm doing this, and you're gonna take a picture, ha ha ha. Well, guess what? That's a pretty horrible form of punishment if you are actually pilloried, uh, for a few reasons. First, so you're standing, right? Your arms are up, your head is forward, so you're kind of like I'm on this little screen, so I can't really show you, but you're in an extremely uncomfortable position, right? This is not a natural position to be in. And depending on how tall you are, you might be crouching down, you might be standing on your tippy toes, whatever it is. Try to hold that position without moving for a long period of time. That is hard and it is painful. So it is just physically painful. It's also humiliating because the pillory wasn't in some private area. It's in the center of town. So everyone wandering around sees you by yourself, pilloried. So people are heckling you, they're making fun of you, they're throwing things at you. When you take a look at this image here, I really like this image. People are throwing what looks like bones. It looks like someone threw a cat for some reason. I don't know why you would throw a cat, but that kind of looks like a cat. I'm guessing most of the times people didn't throw cats, but someone did here for some reason. But might throw rotten vegetables, might throw rocks, whatever, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's not like if someone comes by and pelts you with food that the police or some other group is going to come along and stop that person from pelting you with rotten tomatoes or something, because that's what you're there for. You're there to be humiliated. And so everyone in the community has the opportunity to come and see you, to mock you, to watch you suffer, to make you suffer more than you otherwise would. And we participate in it collectively. Like, it can be a fun thing. We're laughing. We are, if you take a look at this image, this lady, this woman here, is a little smile on her face. The person here too seems pretty happy, and getting ready to throw what looks like might be a rock. I don't really know. Maybe it's not a rock, maybe it's something softer, but still better throw something. Definitely not a cat though, for that guy. But it's a public thing. And so when the public as a group steps up and collectively humiliates, mocks, hurts someone, it's a way for us to it gives us an outlet for that collective rage. We can focus on the offender and we can harm them. Same thing with stoning. Stoning, literally a bunch of people getting together, getting stones and then just throwing them at someone, and typically until that person is dead, is a kind of punishment that you see all over the world, or have seen all over the world. We don't see it much in the modern world, although sometimes. But this is a community thing. This isn't just, there's not like 5 people who have been hired by the town to stone people. This is everyone is infuriated because of some rule, often going to be a religious rule, so infidelity or blasphemy or something. And there's this collective outpouring of rage where people grab rocks and they just throw them at the person. We see these in certainly the histories of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Bible, Christian Bible, Old Testament, which is a foundational text for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, has guidelines in it for when you stone people to death, right? That's a collective group punishment in which we are letting out our collective rage at the offender, at the potential, at the threat to the social solidarity. Crucifixion, I know if you grew up in a society that's dominated by Christianity, we tend to think of crucifixion as something that happened to Jesus and not as just like a regular form of punishment. But for instance, the Romans would crucify a lot of people, right? I mean, they crucified thousands of people. Crucifixions are very public. They're very painful. It is an agonizing, horrible way to die. And it serves as this very public, very painful spectacle that others participate in by just watching, by mocking those who are dying, whatever it is. And then we have burning at the stake. I mean, I could go on and on. There's tons of these things. But what is similar is we're looking at crowds of people, and we're looking at offenders who are being punished in ways that are deeply painful and humiliating, and are made to be a spectacle, made to be public, so that the group collectively has a way to direct their rage. So the response is collective, and through this collective response, through this collective emotional response, the group reaffirms its values. So if we stone people to death for infidelity, well, when we do that, it's a reminder to everyone else, hey, you're not allowed to do that, or you'll get stoned to death. So don't. Reaffirms groups' boundaries, right? So our punishments, our ways of reacting collectively define who we are, and if they define who we are, they also define who we are not, right? So we are this group, we are not them over there, right? We have these morals and values, and here's why we're good, and so on. And this is what differentiates us from the heathens or the pagans or whatever the hell other group we're talking about, the other tribe, whatever. So they remind us who we are, what our values are, remind would-be offenders, define our group's boundaries, and it reaffirms the group's solidarity. So this is really important. If deviance is a threat to the group, if deviance can potentially, or if the group's solidarity is built on us all being similar and built on us following these rules, and someone violates those rules, but when we collectively punish the offender, it's essentially saying, hey, yeah, we recognize that this person violated the rules, and the rest of us are going to come together as a group, punish the person, and so that provides an example to everyone else. It reminds us, hey, don't do this, and it provides us with a way to feel close to each other, to reaffirm our sense of connection, our sense of connectedness, which has just been violated by this deviant, right? So it reaffirms the group's solidarity. So to summarize, we see mechanical solidarity in pre-modern, pre-capitalist, or again, I should have there, non-capitalist societies. Mechanical solidarity really can't exist in capitalism or communism either, or what we think of as modern communism. It's going to be tribal, feudal, agricultural type societies where we're going to see this. What is it? It's solidarity through similarities. People within these groups are self-sufficient. Individuals are essentially microcosms. They're miniature versions of the group. Religion is the source for the collective consciousness, and people punish using repressive justice. So that's the end of this section. The next video is going to pick up right where this leaves off, and it's going to talk about organic solidarity and the differences as well as the implications for punishment. So thank you very much. I hope you have an excellent day or evening or whatever. And I almost said I will see you later, but I won't because I'm looking at a camera and I can't see you. But in my mind, I'll see you later, and you have a wonderful, wonderful day.